Good afternoon and good evening and good morning, depending on where you're watching this today. And welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing and another installment of Council of the Ones Babylon 5 review. And good to be back with you all once again. And we're kind of playing a little bit of catch up here because, well, I screwed up last week and I flipped episodes. So this week we are covering the episode The Ragged Edge. And of course, if this is your first visit or if you are a regular visitor to the Ambassadorial Wing, welcome. Glad that you are here. Please appreciate you all being here. Are you kidding me? Okay, hang on. Stupid fracking blasted avatar. Okay. All right, there. Thank you, Elysium. Anyhow, as I was saying, if this is your first visit to the Ambassador Wing, I hope you enjoy your time here. Hope you enjoy the stream. And as always, smash that like button, share this stream out with your friends, and if you do enjoy what we are doing here on the Ambassadorial Wing, and you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and then share the link out with your friends and tell them this is where the party's at. Because here, we always have a good time. We always have good discussion, good debate. And here we celebrate pop culture. We don't bemoan it. And we certainly don't gripe about it. But today, we are covering the episode The Ragged Edge from Season 5 of Babylon 5. And with me, as always, I'm sure the others are just running behind as they often do. I've got my friend, your friend. You know him. You love him. He has always been here. My good friend, Mountains of Elysium. Elysium, it's good to see you, buddy.
Good to be here. I think the others are hiding from Psychor, so let's give them a fair due.
They very well may be. So, but this episode, this is a pretty good episode. It's got a lot of moving pieces to it, a lot to discuss. So we're not going to stand on a whole ceremony. I've done my plugging. I've done my quote unquote shilling. So let's jump in. The Ragged Edge. So, Elysium, I'm your host. You are my guest. Where would you like to begin?
Well, this episode has so much. It has Garibaldi's ascent back into alcoholism. It has we see the Drazi homeworld, which I've mentioned. I've done a video on my channel about how the Drazi's political ideas of throw two scarfs in a barrel and choose your side. You see how their culture was before in the narrow streets and fighting constantly. And it's such a wonderful touch of world building. And what else? The Londo and Jakar returning and Jakar becoming a religious icon. And we see the danger of people taking their own personal interpretation of a religious belief, how dangerous that can be. Even in the first days of this new religion, we see certain characters taking their own spin and not wanting to listen to anything contrary. So this episode is really packed with a lot of heavy world building and really great concepts.
Yeah. Well, and for me, the concept of a religious leader is always a precarious one, particularly when it's a religion that's just starting out. And I will say this. For Jakar and his stance on this, was, I think, the proper one. Because he doesn't want to be a prophet. He doesn't say want to be a holy man by any stretch of the imagination. But yet he has been thrust into this role. And he honestly is wrestling with the weight of what he has written in the Book of Jakar. The fact that the Book of Jakar has now been published, unbeknownst to him. And he's kind of catching all of this on the fly. And he's like, okay, what the hell do I do? And that's, I think, a very, well, quote unquote, human reaction, but also a very logical one, because anyone who really wants that sort of power and that sort of position doesn't deserve it. But a person who doesn't want it and doesn't seek it is the right person for the job.
And I liked the fact that Talon talked Jakar into it. Talon is very much Jakar's equal and in some ways opposite.
Yes.
They're their own council of three, or between the two of them. Talon is the warrior, and he does say, "Look, I carry my sword in my hand. Yours is in your mind. I have
And
a
your
duty
heart.
to use my in your heart." That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was just brilliant. Like Talon is possibly the ideal Narn. Even more so, I'd say, than Jakar. Jakar is like a spiritual leader. He's someone who's almost transcended
Mm-hmm.
being a Narn, because he did say if he screamed, he'd no longer be Narn. Jakar himself
Yep.
has transcended. Talon is
Yes.
still fully Narn, but he is the
Yes.
perfect Narn.
Yes, he is. And also joined the council. You know him. You love him. He always has a hot take, but often a good one. The one and only Zod Rider.
Yay!
Good to
And
see him.
there's much
Hey
rejoicing.
guys, good to see you.
Good to see you too, bud. Appreciate you being here. So, we just literally got started a few minutes ago, so you have not missed much. We were discussing the Jakar movement, or the
Yes,
Order of Jakar, or whatever way you
Order of
want to
Jakar.
categorize it. So,
Yes,
your thoughts on that?
release the Jakar Cut.
Yeah.
Jakar. When I think about this, and I think about the movement towards the movement of Jakar as a whole, it's remarkable the type of figure that Jakar has become, especially when you go back and you look at where he started, ultimately from season one as being kind of a villain to going further into the series to becoming literally one of the most influential and important historical figures in all of Babylon 5 mythology. And it's just a testament to the awesome acting of Andreas Katsoulis, because Jakar is one of the most noble characters that I would go as far as to say he's one of the most noble characters in science fiction history at this point. And when I look at the whole movement around him, it's not surprising at all, and it's actually a beautiful thing to see. I was quite moved and impressed when I initially seen what was happening.
Yes. Well, and MB Geek brought up a good point. I'll bring it back up here again. This is actually from another franchise that we all know and love, Star Trek. Even though we do jokingly take a few jabs at Deep Space Nine, even so, we all love Star Trek here. Worf said it best for someone like Jakar: "Great men do not seek greatness; they have greatness thrust upon them." Jakar was a humble Narn. That is true. And it is Jakar's story arc and his journey as a character is really a testament to JMS's skill as a writer and as a storyteller. And as you said, Andreas Katsoulis' skill as a actor. Because it would have been very simple for them to keep Jakar just as a one-note vanilla villain. But instead, he grows, he evolves, he changes, he goes through things that would break most people, and yet he comes out of them transformed somehow. And at this particular moment, Jakar is somewhat on his back foot. He doesn't know what to do per se. He just knows because of Talon's advice and guidance that he has a responsibility to these people now because they view him as a leader. I kind of will put before I get to, I will make this point and then I'll let our next member in. I look at Jakar somewhat in the same way as I would say the leaders of the early church, or even one step back, the apostles. These were ordinary men thrust into extraordinary circumstances. So, to bring his voice and his perspective on this conversation, also give a very warm welcome to the head of the Jakar Cut Fighters, Lord Kojis.
Hey!
And there's much rejoicing.
Happy to be
Yay.
And there was indeed much rejoicing. Yay!
Yay.
Woo,
So,
woo. Bring your
Kojis,
cups
good
up.
to see you, bud.
Glad to be here. So I'm a little bit late, but
It's okay.
I'm happy to be here.
A Kojis is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Thank you.
So, Kojis, I imagine you overheard what I was saying in terms of the discussion. We're talking about Jakar's position as the head of this new religious movement. So, I'm going to give the floor to you for a few minutes and let you have your say. Zod, the same, and Elysium, also the same. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Lisa, you want to go first? Or wait, who is that?
No, glad you go first. I was talking earlier, so
I'm gathering
you
my
shout in, I'll
notes.
chime in.
So Zod, please.
Well, I pretty much said how I felt about Jakar. So you can go ahead right now.
Okay.
It's I went into how I felt about Jakar as far as his development from how he started off in the series as essentially a villain, and the evolution that he took into being one of the most inspirational and ultimately spiritual characters in all of Babylon 5 history. So it's sort of I said in terms of science fiction, he's a great character. I mean, he's just extremely, and like Ambassador pointed out, he's very well written. And like I said, the acting from the late Andreas Katsoulis is just out of this world, essentially, for real.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, let me put it to you this way, gentlemen. In terms of the context that I just presented, okay, let's put in this context. Let's say you are in Jakar's position. Let's do this as a hypothetical. How would you react? And to the chat as well. How would you react if you learned that you had written this book and they had been published and put out there for the public, and the public had really latched onto it, particularly your own species, in this case, the other Narns, and this sudden unknown fame and notoriety had come your way, but also this responsibility of leadership? How would you react? Let's put it in that context.
There's an old movie, and I haven't seen it in a while, that kind of touches on that. It's Quo Vadis, where Peter was expected to lead the church, but he ran because he was afraid. And he met a vision of Christ walking along the road. And in some ways, I think that's kind of like the dilemma Jakar could have faced, or what you would face. I personally would not want to face that. That is an awesome responsibility, that they wanted him as the military leader, as their perceived messiah. Now he's become their spiritual leader. In some ways more dangerous for him.
That's true.
And I think Jakar took the right choice, because he is the man who did not want it, but he is someone who can guide them. He's someone who's turned down actual power because he didn't want to be a dictator. So he is probably the only one that could fit into that role because he does not want that power and he does want to genuinely teach.
Yes.
And sorry, Ronnie G is saying the same. I was going to mention that the coffee stain that Garibaldi leaves on the book, that even that is
Yes.
reproduced, and that goes to the. I think I put it in private chat, so I don't want to mention it to be a spoiler, but it goes along something about people not listening to the words, but taking aspects and making that the whole. That the Narn reproduce every line the way it was written, reproduce it exactly. Where Jakar was using the words, it wasn't necessarily the paper it was written on, the coffee stain Garibaldi left, even though that is part of that book's history.
Yes. Well, it goes, and I say this with no bias nor prejudice whatsoever. It goes a lot. It goes a lot of ways in the way that the Quran is written. Everything is meticulously duplicated by hand. Every tear, every imperfection, everything is there as it was from the first original copy that was written. And in some ways as well, also with other holy books, the Torah, the Christian Bible, and so on. And some editions, everything is reproduced right down to the dotting every I and crossing of every T. Now, Koj, Zabre, let me put that same question to you. How would you feel if you were suddenly thrust into the position that Jakar is presented with in this episode?
Humbled.
Koj, what about you?
I think I'd be overwhelmed, taken back, but after a while of contemplating the situation, I feel I probably feel a huge wave of feeling very important for a long time, and I think I would be intimidated of what to do, but I would try my best not to. I don't know. It is weird. I will feel humbled too, but depending on how the reaction would be to anything I would do, I don't know. I'm just I don't want to be like hero worship to the point where I'm turned into something I'm not. So I think I would be I think I would limit my public interactions to specific times where people would hopefully listen, so I could just clarify whatever truth I was trying to convey, and hopefully not let the Coco hero worship get to me.
I think those are all very rational, thought out responses, honestly, because here's my perspective on this. And it kind of goes back to what MB Geek put in the chat before. Ordinary men or people, let me just put it this way, people in general do not necessarily seek acclaim or notoriety. But in some instances, it is thrust upon them. And it is not an easy thing to handle. Because honestly, we are not ever really prepared for that level of responsibility and leadership. Even a person who has trained so many years to become a pastor, a priest, a rabbi, and a mom, whatever the case may be, you carry a great deal of responsibility and accountability upon your shoulders. Because not only are you trying to represent yourself accurately, you are trying to be a representative of centuries, quite literally, of tradition and theology and everything else that comes with that type of position. Speaking as a person who went through seminary and was preparing to become a pastor, to become a leader in God's church, in Christ's church, I recognize the weight of what exactly I was taking on. So Jakar's reaction, I think, honestly, as you all have pointed out very eloquently, was to be expected. He didn't want it. But in not seeking it or wanting it, he had the right level of humility to do things the right way. Now, I will make one further note, and then we can move on from here. And MB Geek, I will get to your comments here in just a few minutes, because I do want to thank you for your thoughts on this episode. So thank you, MB Geek.
Oh, after your note, I'd like to add my sense too.
Okay, sure, absolutely. Just give me like a minute or two, and then you can.
No worries, I got my stuff together.
Okay, you're fine. Being someone who has had the opportunity to do a lot of research and reading on the history of the early church, and being able to read some of the records that have been preserved by people within the early church movement, the Christian church movement, it gives you at least a snapshot into the thinking and the mind of those leaders, particularly apostles. I mean, we know them by name. We can rattle them off. Some of us, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, Paul, James. These were ordinary men. Some of them, in some cases, not even men of great education or position or prestige. But they were chosen because they were ordinary. Because God, through Christ, wanted to show that anyone could be a leader, could be a guide in his church. And that also, salvation was accessible to anyone. So, I want to say hello to the chat. Ryan Rogers Anthony. Ryan, I believe this is your first visit to the Ambassador Wings, so I appreciate you stopping by. So I do want to address a couple of MB Geeks comments, and then Koj, I'll let you have your moment. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I'll bring up this one here. Hang on. Ambassador Wing and I could not and would not want to be compared to Christ. That's what I think in ways Jakar felt in this. Yes. Because while Jakar is by no means divine, and he would not claim to be, he is somewhat in the position of a messianic figure. And I think because he is the voice of his people at this particular time, at a time when they are in a transitory phase in their development as a race. And the interesting thing is as I understand it, the book of Jakar doesn't just resonate with the Narn people, but it resonates with a lot of people. Because lots of people at this time are seeking guidance, seeking something to belong to, something that's bigger than themselves. And I say this as I've often said of JMS, even though he is an atheist, and I respect that. I will never try to coerce him or debate him on that fact. Maybe politely debate, but never be combative. I do respect the way in which he handles matters of religious belief. Always have, always will.
And
So.
one thing, I think I like about JMS is in Babylon 5, it seems to show that God evolving from within the universe. As a Catholic, I believe God created the universe. But JMS shows a God being created from within, from the collective minds of the living beings. And just as a quick aside, in some ways, Jakar is much more Christ-like. I mentioned earlier that when he screamed, when he was being tortured by Carthagia, he saw himself as dying, and he was no longer Narn. In some ways, he died and rose again. He's come back as a different Narn. Just as to go along with the Christ allegory.
Oh, I see that now. That's beautiful.
Very astute. Very, very, very astute, Elysium. Thank you.
Excellent.
Kojay. Yeah, Kojay, you wanted to give your thoughts, so go ahead, bud.
Oh, yeah. So my thoughts, first off, two things. One thing with Jakar is I love his growth as a character. As Zod, you mentioned, he was quite the villain in the beginning. He was tied to his world's, his government's, I should say, military goals and plans to, be a prominent force in the galaxy since they reclaimed their world from the Centauri many years ago. And because that's pretty recent, because when Jakar was a little kid, that's when he was in bunkers and stuff. So he's seen. He was born during the transition from like slaves to having their own freedom and creating their own government to going through that again while he's in his position of power, third circle, and so he's really attached to like that revelation since birth of like because before the Centauri took over Narn, they were peaceful pagan-like people who worshipped like nature and their sun, definitely their sun. So I always saw the Narn in a way as like a Eastern philosophy, because they have really because the Centauri have a god, the great maker and all that, and it seems like the Narn, they have all these appreciation towards nature, and I could see why them as a people would be so broken, as their world was strip mined and they have very few resources, and that hurts nature, which is what they worshipped. So I would imagine before the Centauri came, the Narn I would imagine their society would be built and their science would progress around nature. So I think they would have like a world that's very much like, I guess Pandora from Avatar, how it's just so covered with vegetation. But then we see Narn is like a desert wasteland because it's been stripped mined. So everything that they valued and worshipped as holy, which is nature, was gone. So these people were like just turned into a warrior type of culture. And to go through that all again with the Centauri, I feel like Jakar's path was humbling, changing, and he grew. And I think he became the first of his generation to go back to the original type of concept of what the Narn were truly focusing on. And I like how they do take care of the books, like the Quran and some Bibles, which are made by hand. I like that. But overall, I always kind of saw Jakar, Jaquan, Jalan, and all the other people as like kind of philosophers, like in the East. And philosophers were taken very spiritually, because the concept of holy and spiritualism, when people are perfecting themselves or trying to be better, was considered like a higher state of being. And it wasn't really connected to a god, but more to nature. So I would kind of like, I always looked at the Narn's philosophy more like Taoism, not necessarily Buddhism, because Buddhism, some Buddhists Buddhism is either philosophy based or some of them is God based, where they actually look at some Buddhas as gods. So it's a little different. But
Yeah.
from my understanding, that is because with Taoism, and I'm pretty sure I have a feeling that JMS, with him being atheistic, he's also giving respect to different religions with in his stories, like with the Bible, with Jewish faith and Islamic faith, and also Eastern faith. And I feel like the
Yes.
Narn represent a lot of the Eastern faith, especially with Taoism, as he's mentioned Lao Tzu when in season 1. So I always, because in Taoism they have Lao Tzu, Heian, Jihong, Zhuangji, Zhao Yang Qing, and I'm totally probably butchering some of these pronunciations, but I look at the Narn faith system and it reminds me of Taoism, but the overall look has a little bit of that, like how they take care of the books, just like Islam, or with their
Yes.
Quran, with their books of each follower. But I feel like they look at each person as like a holy philosopher rather than a prophet or a god. So I always
Yeah.
looked at the Narn as more like that Eastern Taoist faith, because if you look at Jakar's book, it came out after all those philosophers of the past, because the Narn were all focused on war and success, that Jakar is like the first philosopher of his people's original faith in a long time, which is huge. And I think that hits him harder because, and I think it hits the people harder, and I think that's why we will see the Narn people kind of try and turn Jakar or look at him like a god, which is
Yeah.
kind of how they do it is a little bit more hero worship and obsessive, which we will see later on. And he realizes no matter how he tried, he was the distraction, because the whole of people did not go through his revelation, and it seems like they were kind of missing it when they were reading his book, which is why when Jakar goes to write his other book to clarify that after a new journey, after he leaves and says, I'm a distraction, I can't do this anymore. So I think he has a second book in the future that helps his people go, oh, don't hero worship, follow your own path or whatever, and really pay attention to the philosophy instead of the hero worship. And that's just what I've seen as a theory, because
Mhm.
there is a book by Lao Tzu called the Dao
Mhm.
Jing, which is translates to the classic of the way to power, and it's one of the earliest Taoist books. And again, it's
Hmm.
each book, each philosophy is done by a different person, and each person kind of reads and follows that. But it's about self and betterment usually, and appreciation. Like Taoism is appreciating your point, your position in the world of nature. Nature also connects to the planet, life, other beings, and the galaxy, because galaxy to them is thought of as nature. So I always kind of saw the Narn as Taoist in that sense. So they really don't have a god per se. They just
Mhm.
have this following. But with Jakar being the first philosopher in a long time, I think he became accidentally looked on like a god, and I think that becomes a problem later. But the whole path that he became, because Jakar really was big on Jaquan, and the fact that his journey, his contribution to his people and being a better person surpassed what he read, I think that's another thing that kind of humbled and broke him even more, and reflected that Jakar has more responsibility to his people, because he said he didn't want to be a ruler, he just wanted to help, and which is a very humbling, huge thing for him to do, because before he was on a quest of power. So now I think this is his realization even more of the path that he's on, that he's still a leader. He's always been a leader. He's always been Narn. He's always been putting Narn first. It's only without knowing he's been the true healer of his people, in the sense that he's the first awakening to go, we weren't meant, we should never be meant to be people thriving for war, power, and conquering. We should be people who are trying to be good and help each other, because the
You,
universe, we're all the same.
you
And
know
that's a
what,
very
Koj?
nature output.
You know what, Koj? What you just said, it just hit me. And this is one of those things that when you think about it, Jakar, how you said how he'd always been about like a quest for power. The irony is that he actually ended up gaining that power, not really in the way that he envisioned, but ultimately, yes, he has that power. He's a very, very powerful figure, perhaps, you know, the biggest figure in all of Narn. So it's like the idea that he, you know, that he always strove for that power, but was just going about it the wrong way. It's quite fascinating. Yeah,
because before he was in the quest to attain power.
Yeah,
and then now I feel he has the most powerful, almost as close to Valen. Valen is probably Sinclair. That's what's cool about Sinclair is I feel Sinclair and Jakar are of the same cut, because Sinclair is doing the same thing when he went back in time as Valen, and Sinclair and Jakar, to me, in my aspect of philosophers, they have the most strongest power, which is not to attain power, but the power to empower others.
It's like if you go back and you look at some of the early exchanges that Sinclair and Jakar used to have with each other, the way they would spar at each other, neither one of them knew at that time just what they would ultimately become, what their places in the universe would be. They truly had some of the most beautiful arcs ever as people, essentially, because they were mortal enemies, essentially sparring in terms of, you know, for different, you know, totally different ideologies. But then, you know, the comparison you made, which was brilliant, essentially proves one is essentially Valen, and then one is one of the greatest Narn ever, you know, since Jaquan. And now you have this, both of them became like so spiritual that they would probably look back at the two of them would probably look back at what their history was with each other, and it's almost like their combativeness foreshadowed their eventual spiritual ascension.
And I'm glad you brought up Sinclair too, because the last thing they both said to each other when they last saw each other, Sinclair looked at Jakar and he said something along the lines of, "I see we're at a crossroads and I don't like where we're going." And both of them went on. He went to Minbar and then became Ranger 1, which is terrifying because he had to face terror. And Jakar faced terror of his world being victimized from tyranny. And they both were broken to become better. I think Sinclair had a more peaceful way about it, of course, because it was training and whatever. But also Sinclair, his tragedy also started with the Battle of the Line too. And then when they came into being, you know, Sinclair had this transformation to Valen. And then we're witnessing slowly over time Jakar becoming this humble, peaceful figure now. Of course, I say spiritual and holy in the sense of an Asian part where you're just detaching yourself from material things and you're trying to do better for the world around you. And they don't say it because they focus on what's around. But in my faith, I believe that it's people doing betterment that would please God without knowing it. And because they're following in, not giving into what like things like the Bible and the Quran would say, or like materialistic things, and they're just focusing on being good living beings for the world around them. And I think that's just beautiful. That's just a very rare story and powerful message that you rarely get in fiction, especially sci-fi.
And the fact that it happened to two central characters in that series, that those two characters were so pivotal and so important to the fabric of everything. And when you think about that, it just boggles the mind, you know.
And it all starts from season 1.
Yeah,
from the beginning, episode 1. We see their journey. It sets it out. It's so great.
There's something we spot too with them, that both in some ways are rejected. We find out that Valen that his children are rejected by the other Minbari, and they take Valen's message through to the future, and we see where it ends with the warrior caste with the Minbari Civil War. But it took 1,000 years. They just took it more long term. Here we
Again,
see the
war.
Narn, and Jakar spots it. The Narn are trying to project God in their image. Rather than listening to his words, they're trying to take their own ideas. First, they try to project him as a military leader, praise God. Then they see him as a religious leader. They don't listen to what he's saying, but they're projecting their own ideas onto him and trying to, like with Byron, trying to project their own ideas onto someone and using him as a flag. And I like that Jakar is trying to stop. Says, no, don't do that. I'm sorry. I think Ambassador, you've been quiet for a while. I think we've all been talking.
Oh, I wanted to give you all a chance to get your ideas out there, because this isn't just about me. It's about all of us getting our thoughts out on this topic, because it is this is something we don't get to touch upon very often in science fiction or in pop culture in general. I mean, the only other character, and I will address the chat here in a few minutes because several of you have put some very interesting comments in here. The only other character that really parallels outside of Babylon 5 to Jakar, or even Jeffrey Sinclair, aka Valen, is Paul Atreides, Muad'Dib. Here is a young, and we see this at least in part in the first part of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Here's a young man who has the gift of foresight, or if you prefer to say the curse of foresight, the curse of knowing his future, and he's terrified by it. But at the same time, he is driven by by his future, by this foresight that he has been granted due to his genetic heritage, and also due to some choices that were made unbeknownst to him. And Paul doesn't want this power. He says it very powerfully. Timothée Chalamet, I think, in his role as Paul Atreides, says it very powerfully. He's like, I see a great crusade, a great war stretching across the galaxy. I see a holy war carried out in my name. And he's like, it scares him to death. And I've made this point previously. You can hear it on my my review of Dune from last year. And if you look at the other adaptations of Paul Atreides, from, if you want to look at the one from the 1980s and also the one from the year 2000s that the Sci-Fi Channel did, that thread is still common there with Paul. But I think what you have in Denis Villeneuve's version is you have Paul at the proper age, and you, I think, have really the proper reaction. And Jakar's and Paul's reactions to this whole concept of a religion built around them, and they are just a regular, ordinary person, is very, very powerful and also very terrifying. And, I'll start, Elysium, I'll start here. Let's see. Let me get the private chat here. Yeah, Elysium, I will agree here on your comment here. Cisco Ditto and Deassign takes on a religious leader, but not to the same extent. Yeah, because his role as prophet was actually somewhat limited in terms of what he actually had to do. It isn't a constant issue throughout the course of the series. So, but starting here with Elysium, your comment. Peter Kriff, I'm assuming I pronounced that correctly. Yeah. The Catholic Church is the Ark of Salvation, just like Noah's Ark is full of strange and weird animals. You'll be right at home. That's true. I mean, if you think about any religious belief, really, you're going to find people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, even obviously different ethnicities even. But we all have this one shared thing in common that unites us and binds us. And gives us a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose in our lives. And Archer Cullen, your comment here as well about the Narn's religious structure. I believe the Sikh religion is very similar to the Narn, with gurus rather than actual deities. Yeah, that's true, because a lot of your Eastern religions, and Kojay, correct me here if I'm wrong. If I'm going to understand what you said previously, a lot of the heads of these different Eastern religions are seen more as guides rather than deities, except for maybe Buddha.
No, Buddha's supposed to be a guide too, because the idea is that
Yeah. Okay.
when he attains being Buddha, it means
Hmm.
he's cleansed from any ill attachment to material things. Like he's come to a state of being where nothing can influence him to evil and whatever, which is interesting because the very first time this is a legend, you might like this. The first time, like Siddhartha, there's a story of the first Buddha. He became Buddha right before he was meditating, right before he was coming to the state of being in his mind. What I mean is mindset, focus.
Mm-hmm.
And let me elaborate that on a little bit. It's like if you are a recovering alcoholic and you go through AA meetings or whatever it takes to be at peace and not being tempted to pick up the drink again, or to just not let the drink control you and take you down, and just not letting the drink control your life. You're just at, like, it doesn't even tempt you anymore, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And you will never give in to that decision of destruction and malpractice and whatever. You're just good, and no matter if what comes your way, you'll never go there again, and you don't even have to try. You've become sober for life, and that's who you are. It's essentially kind of like that with everything else. And before he became the first Buddha, the devil shows up in the form of a snake slithering around, and the snake doesn't bite, but what the snake does, or what the devil does, it creates riches around him, and it doesn't faze him. He has sexy women come to him to try and taunt him to sexual delight. It doesn't faze him, and he keeps trying to distract him, but he can't. And the devil slithers away and is without power right when he becomes to his state of being. And I personally like that because I believe in Christ. I believe in God. And when I heard that story, because I grew up, my whole family's Asian, so these things I'm just familiar with. I just thought that was very beautiful, and it shows the truth between good and evil. That our state of mind being is everything that will help us be good people, and in what I believe, get closer to heaven and God. That's my extra part. But for them, it's the practice. So the idea, and this is key for what I was going to say later as the last of my notes, is that
You're fine.
the problem with hero worship is that the people look to the person as a god, or as like a prophet, and as a way of a quick way to get to the end without doing the work. And what I mean by that is like, oh, I'm going to defend your honor, then I am good on your same plane. But the real message is, no, you must be as good as me, or you must be better than me, or you must be, it's like you have to be a Buddha too. So the idea of what I've learned, what the true Buddhism is that anyone could be a Buddha. Zod, Elysium, Fiona, you, me, I could be a Buddha. And the goal is to work our way so we could get to that state of being and never be tempted by evil. And you can't get there if you hero worship someone, because then if you hero worship a person and follow behind them, then you're essentially not doing the work so you could be a good person and do great things, because we're all equal. So the idea is that we could all be like that. But once you get into hero worship, like for example, like in the I see this a lot in any fandom of any person, like Bruce Lee or whatever. But no, not I take that back with Bruce Lee. That's a little different. But let's say Zack Snyder. I have a lot of my homies and people are all like Zack Snyder fans, but I do notice on the side there's some people who look at him like a perfect god like person. Like there's too much hero worship there. And me personally, I don't see it like that. Like I'm a fan of the guy's work. I love what he does, and I vouch for him because out of all the favorite directors I like, he's the only one that doesn't get the credit I feel he deserves that the other directors I like get, like Troy Hart or Zhang Yimou, Jim Henson, Guillermo del Toro. The list goes on, blah blah. But I feel they don't need my help as much because they get the respect that they deserve. I just feel Zack Snyder doesn't. So I write for his work a lot, but I don't see him like better than me, and I don't mean that it's a diss. I just mean that he is another human being. You know, we're all children of God.
Very well said, Koj.
So yeah, because case in point, I was invited to see like Justice is Gray in IMAX theaters or whatever, right? And I turned it down because the day of seeing it was when I wrapped with I had a night shoot for my film, and I only shot one day of shooting last year because of COVID and all that. I can only afford one, but I was tired. I had work the next day. I had to turn it down because I need my energy doing my work, because I'm not a popular director. I may not be regarded as great, but in my heart and mind, I see myself as a director as good as, or if not better than Zack Snyder, Guillermo del Toro, all those people. I have to see myself as the best director because that's how I'll give my best. It's kind of like going into art school. They're like, well, you need a backup plan. And
be your best self. You have to be your biggest fan. That's essentially true.
Exactly. And I feel and I feel the hero worship gets rid of that. It's like, all right, you need a backup plan if you're going to do this, or I don't know. It's like hero worship kind of puts you down and puts someone else up, and then you kind of use the hero worship as an excuse for what you do, and you don't do the hard work to bring yourself and be a better person because you're using this excuse of someone else, something else as a reason or cause or excuse of what's going on with what you're doing, rather than doing the actual work and going on this discovery to find out what truth it is, you know? And I think that's what Jakar discovers later. And when we get there, I'll elaborate more on that. But it's the work you do when, like, even with there's this great book by Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life, and
I've heard of it.
The Bible. Yes. Yeah, The Purpose-Driven Life. I'm reading that right now, and that is such a beautiful book about scriptures and parts of the Bible, because it applies and highlights the work we have to do in our life with what we've learned from the Bible. And they have a beautiful acronym for the Bible, which is Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth. And that philosophy,
I actually have heard that before.
I have not, since coming across this book. So I thought that was a great revelation for me, and I just love that. And again, reading the book, I'm seeing that I'm not just like showing up to church, and after church is done, I'm just forgetting everything I learned and is going on, and doing casual sins left and right and just being blah 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 blah, and then I just show up. It's like, to me, faith shouldn't be a punch card. Faith should be a practice that you actually put to work. And then, in my experience, when you do that, you get closer to the truth and you become a better person. And hopefully we get closer to, God and all that. So I think the hero worship is a big mistake. And I think that's going to be shown perfectly in this series.
And I wholeheartedly and candidly agree, because you don't ever, this is a phrase, and it's a phrase that has been used in a few other series that I very much enjoy, and I imagine a few other people have. The phrase is never meet your heroes, because they will inevitably disappoint you or let you down. I myself, and I kind of want to put a pin. I want to kind of wrap this up, because I do want to at least address
Garibaldi's adventure.
Garibaldi's little adventure as well.
Garibaldi's episode,
So, hey, don't misunderstand me. This has been a great conversation and great points all across the board, and especially to y'all in the chat and everything. Even though MB Geek, you've had your points of contention and everything, and hey, you're more than welcome to state them here. So do not think that we're by any means ignoring you. It's just I don't want to break the flow of the conversation and everything, particularly when it's going this well.
And this is most certainly not an echo chamber. Let's just put it that.
No. If we disagree with each other, we will do so civilly as fellow ambassadors. The thing for me with the whole idea of hero worship, I have had heroes in my life. I would be lying if I said I didn't. But I never elevated them beyond what I felt that they should have been. Now, in terms of people who have had an influence on me in a religious manner, that really hasn't happened until, well, within the last 10 years or so. But I always kept in the back of my mind that these men and women, more often than not pastors or people who have been instructors or teachers or whatever the case may be during my seminary education, they are first and foremost human, just like me. And they are just as much trying to work their way through life the same as I am. But I do look to them for guidance and advice because in many cases, they are older than me. They have had life experience that I have not had. And I've always prefaced anything I've asked of them or said of them with this. I recognize the fact that you are human, that you are flawed, and that you are imperfect. I do not raise you above the God that we worship nor the Savior that we share. But I come to you because you are a representative of that God and of Christ. And in a few rare instances, individuals who are outside of my faith, particularly of the Jewish faith. I have, on a few occasions, had the opportunity to speak with a rabbi. Never had the opportunity to speak with them, but I've had a few occasions where I've had the opportunity to speak with a rabbi. And I was like, I know that I am outside of your faith, but your insight here would be very much appreciated if you're willing to share it. And in those rare occasions, they have been good enough to share their insight. Jakar is in a very rare position, one that none of us here will probably ever attain within our lifetimes. But that does not mean that we should not necessarily not try. We should not necessarily seek it because it is a very heavy responsibility. I remember something my late uncle, my dad's brother-in-law, my aunt's husband said to me, because he himself was a pastor. And he told me, if you ever become a pastor, remember this. You not only represent your family or hang yourself in your own credibility and your own reputation, but you have a higher duty. And that is to the Lord God Almighty and to our Savior Jesus Christ. Never forget that. Never take it for granted. But do not fear it. But see it as something to aspire to. So that when you meet God and when you meet Christ, you will hear those words that every Christian hopes to hear. Welcome home, good and faithful servant. Go to thy rest. Anyway, we'll take a minute, let that just sit, and then we'll give some time to Garibaldi's little adventure, and then we will wrap up. So
Mm.
thank you, Joel. Okay. Garibaldi's mission to Narn. Let's open the discussion on that particular plot point. Where do y'all want to begin with it?
Dang, Garibaldi's friend is cool. I was sad to hear he got him, you know? When Garibaldi met up with his friend, I just got this like Han Solo type of group vibe from these guys. Like they're just making their way in the world, but they're also down to earth. And I really like what he said about the Drazi and how their quarters are so narrow, which is hilarious because that's a very easy, well, not easy, but that's a convenient set to do in any situation you have without rebuilding stuff or whatever. But that their culture is all tradition because of like just of ancient times. They made like streets narrow so like big weapons and armies can't get through, and they just kept it, like how people of different genders have the buttons facing different ways because back in the day people didn't change themselves, they were dressed. So those styles keep on going. So it's I like that little note of culture right there, and that they keep it even with the Drazi, which is nice. But dang, Garibaldi effed up again.
Sadly, yes, he did. So, and I will bring up Archer Collins' comment here if it'll pop. I read that Jerry Doyle was somewhat insistent that Garibaldi's alcoholism be shown to have some real and serious consequences, much to his credit. Yeah,
Very true. Very, very true.
Zod, you know that very well. You've interviewed Jerry Doyle.
Yes, I have, and he was very insistent upon alcoholism being treated like a real disease that it is, even that far in the future for Babylon 5. And it's just sad and ironic that Jerry Doyle was suffering from alcoholism himself, which essentially, again, and that, and that's what makes the character of Garibaldi so tragic, because there's so much true to life there about the character as well as the man who portrayed the character, and all the stuff that went on in this adventure with Garibaldi and his friend. There was just, and I agree with exactly what you said, Koji, about like a Han Solo type vibe.
Yeah.
But there was also this odd sense of foreboding throughout the entire plot point there. Like there was something that just, to me, that just didn't sit right with the whole thing. And it's like you kind of get the idea this is not going to end well.
And especially with Garibaldi, because he's gone back to alcoholism, which he's been there before,
right?
With the whole with his friend Mike. No, when that girl called him Uncle Mike, I forget her name. Ilana, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course,
and
of course, pining for Lise doesn't help. I mean,
yeah. But this time he's going back to a buddy from back in those days, because that friend hasn't been with him when he went through sobriety. Gone to Babylon 5. So his friend has no idea that he doesn't drink anymore. So the temptation for Garibaldi to continue drinking is even subtly presented to him, and he has no hesitation. He goes back to it tragically. And it screws up, and his friend dies, right? The Drazi got him. Oh,
yeah. Well, actually, no.
Sorry, Buster.
No, go ahead, Lyceum. Go ahead. You're fine.
It's funny that you contrast that with the other friend of his that we see in, I believe it's in season 1, who also hadn't seen him since he had been alcoholic in TKO.
Yes.
And there, Garibaldi
Smith
says no. Well, yes, Walker Smith. He drinks water in front of him, and when he asks, why don't you have a drink? He says, no, I cannot have a drink. Here, Garibaldi he starts to say no, but he gives in. He doesn't even quite, I think he's already on that downward
It's
spiral.
that, and not only that, it's that nostalgia ring too. You know, Elysium with like you're with that friend that you haven't been with, and you're sort of falling back into that old pattern, essentially, to reunite as a form of a renewed bonding, so to speak. Did you get that? Did you get that impression as well? Because
I did.
and that's kind of where I fell with that. The idea was, yeah, he has a problem, and yeah, he's slipping, but essentially, if he would have said no, it would almost been like an affront to the friendship at that point in some weird way, like a brotherly bond of some type.
Mm.
Well, and you know, Garibaldi deliberately isolates himself because Franklin is somewhat insistent about going to the Drazi homeworld, and Garibaldi's like, nope, I got it, and you almost get the impression that the wheels are turning inside Franklin's head, and Franklin's like, wait a minute, something's not right here.
Yeah, because Franklin had the same face I had. He was very offended. He's like, what? This guy kind of shocked. Like, what? I can't go? And
yeah, and you see just how insidious and how quickly a disease like alcoholism can ensnare you.
Because it's also sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Coach. You're
because being isolated and insisting on isolation in that negative way is also a form of depression, which is tied to alcoholism too. I just want to say that. So
yeah, well, because and you know, I will say this, I think, and our Archer says, I did wonder how long the friend was lying there shot. I'm not sure. It was light when he got shot, but fairly dark when Garibaldi woke up and found him. So, and DJ Ronnie, no accountability partners, Sarah Seed. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't know if specifically AA still exists in 2261, 62, somewhere along in there. No, wait a minute, it's later than 62. Thank you. But you would imagine that some of the principles of that program might still exist. So, and it's unfortunate because Garibaldi, up until this point, had been dry. He had been sober. He had been carrying on with his sobriety, no problem. But what was the trigger? The fact that dirty rat little jerk, I'll just come with that dirty rat little bastard has screwed with his head to the point where Garibaldi cannot get any satisfaction, and not even after the little crap is dead. That wears on you. That tears at your soul when you have been messed over so utterly and completely, and you can't get 1 ounce of satisfaction. What do you do? Now, am I saying it's completely excusing what Garibaldi's doing by going back to drinking? No. But at the same time, what the hell do you do?
Well, there's always a justification. It just depends on the circumstances, right? However, you can justify it to yourself, going back down that rabbit hole, however negative it may be. Everybody that has an addiction of some sort and pulls away from it and then somehow gets reacquainted with it has a reason. And oftentimes it is something traumatic, because an addiction like that is essentially nothing more than a coping mechanism.
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking, that exact same thing that just a minute before you said it, Consult Writer. And I say this with all sincerity, and no, I'm not saying it to brag, because I would never do that to a person who's had to deal with addiction. I have been strangely fortunate in my lifetime that I've never had to battle with any type of addiction, because very early in life and very young in my life, I had several people, also now my from my other late uncle, my mom's brother, who I recently lost. He also taught me a very important lesson. All things in moderation. Never overdo anything, otherwise it will become an addiction, and it will, unless you can stop it, cause your downfall, cause your destruction. I have remembered those words ever since he first said them to me, and several other people in my life have said that to me as well. I do feel bad for Garibaldi. I would be lying if I said I didn't. I think we all share that sentiment here. He has been royally screwed over by Bester, and in this instance, and pretty much in general. If I had the will and the means to break that barrier inside Garibaldi's head and give him some peace and say, "Go get him, tear him to pieces, and no one will lift a finger to stop you," I would absolutely do it. I would. If I had that power to free Garibaldi from those shackles, I'd even pin Bester's arms behind his back and say, "Here, you had the first few shots until you get him softened up enough." I'm by no means a violent person, but when somebody screws over somebody that I care about, in some instances, depending on the severity of the offense, all bets are off. And when it comes to what Bester did to Garibaldi, you better damn well believe all bets are off. But go ahead, Coach Jay.
I just thought you were done.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad that we have this story of alcoholism, and we gotta like put like a link to that interview you had with Jerry Doyle, Zod, because that was great. Because the fact that Jerry Doyle was able to the fact that Jerry Doyle was able to present this story to be included in Babylon 5 works with the whole arc, because they shot the last episode at the end of season 4, and the whole thing of Garibaldi betraying Sheridan was something he felt guilty of. But then you have another season where they're working together. That ending wouldn't make sense because they have a year to reconcile. So having Garibaldi screw up again fits that end episode that they shot in season 4 perfectly, because it's like, oh, he didn't just, when he feels like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go see Sheridan at this last meal because I screwed up so bad. So it's not just that he ratted him out to Clark's forces, but he also let the alliance down. And it adds more weight to that scene when we get to Sleeping in Light, of what Garibaldi still regrets of the mistake he made originally, but now it's mistakes he had because of the whole alcoholism and how it affected the alliance and how a war broke out and stuff, So I think everything worked out perfectly, because from that interview Zod had with Jerry Doyle, that story meant a lot to him, that he was able to get in.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Everything worked out.
And here's the thing: did Garibaldi screw up? Yeah, but here's the other side of that. Can any one person prevent an entire war from happening? I don't know.
This is true. It could have helped, but you never know. But I'm just thinking, seeing Garibaldi as how he's really hard on himself. He's hard on criminals to the law perfectly. And I think he applies that same philosophy to himself when after he survived his mistakes. He looks back and he's hard on himself, I think. And I think that's what he's thinking. I think he's probably adding more weight to his failures of the actions that happened after his mistakes.
Just a quick question. Do you think if Franklin had gone along, that he could have prevented the incident with Tafik? I personally
think so.
Yeah, because I think Garibaldi knew he was effing up and didn't want Franklin along for the ride.
Exactly. I don't think. Yeah, that's perfectly noted, because I don't think Garibaldi was prepared to be in the same shoes of Franklin when he called Franklin with taking the stems. So I think Garibaldi knew that way ahead because he knew that history. And I agree with you, Elysium. I think he knew that it would be different because I think Garibaldi really doesn't want to give up the drink at this point.
Yeah. Because for him, it's a coping mechanism. It's helping numb the pain from the fact that he can't get Bester.
And Bester's in control of his life every single day, essentially, because he's literally in his head.
Yeah. And I have included the link to Zod Rider's interview with Jerry Doyle in the chat. So I'm most definitely going to give that a listen and everything at some point. I encourage y'all, if you want to hear with no undue bias and not to puff up his ego, though he does not necessarily have one. You want to hear a good interviewer conduct a good interview, check it out. It's worth your time. And I do want to say hello to the chat, Bureau 31. Bureau, it's good to see you. You're getting here a little bit late because we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes, but obviously check out the replay because this, I have to say, every stream is fun. Every discussion is insightful and a lot of fun, but this has to be one of my top favorites. So, but we do get one small bit of good news out of this episode in terms of the whole issue with who's attacking the trade routes of the Alliance, and it comes from Londo's own mouth, and they're like, "Oh crap, we are so screwed right now," and you feel legitimately bad for everybody in the room, including Londo, because even he doesn't necessarily realize it's his own people that are conducting these attacks. Granted, it's at the behest or the coercion or whatever way you want to put it of the Druk, but still, it's a sucky situation all the way around. Go ahead, Elysium.
So I like that Jakar was the one who saved Londo. He said, "No, Londo would never ever do this. This is not Londo. If he tried to do anything, his people would kill him. People have already tried to assassinate him."
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fantastic that Jakar is his bodyguard, even here.
Yes.
Protect Londo at all costs. We know he's the leak, but we've got to protect him.
I love that.
Protection is the key. There you go.
Yeah.
That's true friendship, because even apart, they're still friends and supporting each other. Because even Londo, he said that in the days to come, I'm going to, the position changes you. And it's just that. And I think Londo sent that message to Jakars, like, in a way, without saying it, that they're still friends forever. We just can't tell them about the keeper.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, well, anyways, folks.
So, greetings to Orville Nation. He's just popped into the chat. And it's great to see you here.
Yeah, Orville Nation. It's been a while. Good to see you. So, but gentlemen, if there are no other points we want to cover, I think we will go ahead and wrap up for this afternoon.
I'm gonna make a quick point and just a quick FYI to let everybody know.
Sure.
Do not drink Nitro Pepsi. It is horrible. Just putting that out there.
Really drink soda, but why is that one bad?
The Council of Ones does not.
My God.
The Council of Ones does not endorse Nitro Pepsi. You've heard it here first, folks.
It's Spoo milk, is it? Like a milk from the
I don't know what it is, but you know what's funny? I cracked open the can, and the can it nearly exploded in my hands.
Oh,
and I was afraid to drink it. I was drinking it during the show, thinking, my God, is my stomach gonna explode in an hour or two? Because I'm like feeling this weird, like bubbly sensation. Guys, seriously, you do not want to put this in your bodies. I'm just
okay.
It's the other gray meat, is it?
I will bring this up. I saw something today I never thought I would ever see in my entire life. As I was getting a few things before I headed home from work, I actually saw in our drink aisle a case of flaming hot Mountain Dew, and I'm like,
Oh my
what?
God. Yeah.
What?
Whoa.
Flaming hot Mountain Dew? That stuff is bad enough for you as it
Mountain
is.
Dew
You
isn't
don't
bad
need
enough
it to
for
be
you.
flaming hot. Just no. I hope that by the year 2262, that flaming hot Mountain Dew is not still a thing. Oh, for the love,
Ouch.
please.
Whoa.
No.
Yeah, I'm gonna be
I
walking
mean,
on
it's got
eggshells
that.
all day today now because of what I just
Yeah.
consumed. I'm like, I don't know what just happened, but
Oh
Flaming
man,
hot,
do
yeah.
not miss Zod Rider's next live show because then we'll know he's okay.
Right.
Let's hope so.
right.
Zod, please DM us later to let us know you're still alive. So,
Be used by Jadur as the something to kill those many species in the Dilgar War.
Or you turn into another being with a gun to your hand saying
Well,
protect.
you know what the irony is? It says right on the can, it says smooth, creamy, and easy to drink. But what it doesn't tell you, yeah, it's almost like saying, yeah, please intake this poison, because essentially you're taking a risk. So they want to make it as smooth and creamy as possible, but it really doesn't taste like anything but air, to be honest. It's, wow.
I'm sorry.
in other words, it doesn't taste as good as Rothgar's Golden Mead from Beowulf.
Probably not.
And speaking of Beowulf, I do want to let you all know a little channel update here before we wrap up. I will be going live tomorrow evening at, I want to say 7:30 ish Central Time with a new installment in modern pop review, and I will be doing a discussion on Robert Zemeckis' Beowulf. So, hope to see some of you all there for that. I may pop the link in the chat and everything if anybody wants to join me for that discussion. And then I will be making an appearance over on Orange Hat Reviews channel Sunday evening. I'll be joining him at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 Eastern, and we'll be doing a review of a all-time favorite of mine. You could almost say it's an ultra retro all-time favorite. Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles. So, hope to see you all there for both of those streams. And of course, if you're not, I know he has some hot takes, but I regard Orange Hat as a friend. So if you're not subscribed to Orange Hat Reviews and you want good movie discussion, even if you want to pass on some of his other stuff, he does do really good movie discussion, good pop culture discussion. Go give him a sub and tell him yours truly sent you. So
sorry, I had 1 sec. Speaking of subs, guys in the chat, Ambassador is at 484 subs. He's nearly at 500. Could you please tweet out his channel and get him to 500?
Yeah.
yes, I can do. So I can do my giveaway because the people have spoken. You don't want a Blu-ray 4K movie. I'm going to do that. I've just got to figure out what movie to do. And we're also, once we hit 500, we're going to do a watch party for one of my all-time favorite films, Galaxy Quest.
Oh,
The other Star Trek. So, as soon as we hit 500, as soon as we hit that milestone, we will get all those things going. And as an added cherry on this little when we hit this celebration, I will be doing a name reveal, namely my own. Pun intended. First name only. I am not going to give you all my full name. That's reserved for family and very close friends. But anyway, as Elysium said, share this out with all your friends. Let's get to 500 and onward on to 600. So, anyways, folks, thank you all for tuning in this afternoon or this evening, depending on when you watch this. Hope you all enjoyed the discussion. We will, of course, be back next week with another installment. And as always, this is the Council of One saying 3, 2, 1.
Zooty!
Zooty!
Zooty!